Do the quiet, faithful things that we do when no one is watching, does that actually have significance in the end? I often think that redemption looks ordinary, right? In many cases throughout the Bible, and many cases in our lives. But God is working through them, these small, quiet actions. And in Ruth chapter 4, we're going to unpack the city gate, the kinsman redeemer, the marriage of Boaz and Ruth, and the way God can turn emptiness into a royal future. And I'm going to give you one immediate action to help you act faithfully in ordinary circumstances, and how your obedience can carry significant weight in this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. If you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now, let's get a little bit of context into the chapter. Okay, so Ruth chapter 4 closes the book at the city gate, where Boaz legally redeems Naomi's land and Ruth's future by taking responsibility as kinsman redeemer. The nearer redeemer actually steps aside. Boaz marries Ruth, and the Lord gives them a son, Obed. Naomi, who was once bitter and empty, is now blessed with a child who will continue the family line. And the chapter ends by tracing the genealogy from Perez to David, showing again that this private act of loyalty, this little segment of the Bible, actually sits within God's larger redemptive plan. So let's read the first 8 verses. Boaz is going to negotiate redemption at the city gate. And my question to you is, why does redemption happen in public, not private space? Verse 1. No sooner had Boaz gone up to the gate and sat down there than the next of kin, of whom Boaz had spoken, came passing by. So Boaz said, "Come over, sit down here." And he went over and sat down. Then Boaz took 10 men of the elders of the town and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. He then said to the next of kin, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, but if you will not, tell me so that I may know. For there is no one prior to you to redeem it, and I come after you. So he said, I will redeem it. Then Boaz said, the day you acquire the field from the hand of Naomi, you are also acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead man, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance. At this the next of kin said, I cannot redeem it for myself without damaging my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm a transaction. The one took off a sandal and gave it to the other. This was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the next of kin said to Boaz, acquire it for yourself, he took off his sandal. Okay, so why did we move to the city gate? Why was the story present there? The reason is because I think it's important to show something, that redemption is going to move beyond merely the emotional or even the spiritual. It's actually something that's going to be present here in a public and covenantal setting. And the city gate was actually where matters were settled and witnessed. So Boaz is not actually acting out of impulse. He's acting in accordance with the rules and regulations present within the society. And real redemption here must be loving and just, and public order can help do that. And it's interesting because the nearer redeemer, so we talked about the prerequisites that Boaz made in the previous chapter. He said that I will only be your next of kin redeemer, or whatever, the nearer redeemer. I will be it if a nearer redeemer steps aside. Okay, so he's giving an opportunity for someone closer to Ruth to redeem, but if that person does not, then he will come in and help out. And we notice that he speaks to him, right? because Boaz is righteous before God before he's romantic. That's interesting because he could be driven by his passions, and it's actually a big contrast between him and Samson, right? And he gives the nearer kinsman the first opportunity, so he respects both the law and the family order. And what is interesting is that the chapter wants you to see that Boaz is not trying to seize Ruth, but he acts faithfully within the responsibility of the covenant. And the nearer redeemer actually steps aside when Ruth is involved because he is willing to redeem the land but not take on the marriage obligation that comes with preserving the family line. So the sandal exchange that we saw right at the end, that actually is a transfer of legal right. And the chapter shows that redemption is costly. It's not just a transaction, but it's a willingness to bear responsibility. Okay, let's read verses 9 to 17. The focus here is going to be Boaz acquiring Ruth and the land, and the elders blessing the union, and Ruth and Boaz are going to have Obed, and Naomi is going to be restored. So my question to you is, why does the kinsman redeemer matter so much in the story, and why does the story actually shift from the sort of legalistic presentation that we saw before to now family joy? Okay, let's read verse 9. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witness today that I have acquired from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, to be my wife, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance, in order that the name of the dead may not be cut off from his kindred and from the gate of his native place. Today you are witnesses." Then all the people who were at the gate, along with the elders, said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you produce children in Ephrathah, and bestow a name in Bethlehem. And through the children that the Lord will give you by this young woman, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." Okay, so that was verses 9 to 12. The verses 13 to 18 is actually going to be the genealogy of David. So that's going to be very interesting, and we're going to go through that in a little bit more detail. But that being said, I think what's important to recognize in this section of the chapter, so verses 9 to 12, is that there is a blessing over Boaz and Ruth. And Ruth's inclusion is quite interesting because she's a Moabite widow, right? But she's being welcomed into the very line that's now going to shape Israel's future. So again, it's very similar to, what was her name? Rahab, the prostitute, right? She is also a part of that line that leads on to Jesus. And we saw that in Joshua, right? People who you would not expect are present in the biblical narrative because God does not say no to anyone, in the sense that he welcomes all to be a part of his covenant. All people, even people that we reject, he includes. And that's something that we need to be very careful about. In the same way, Ruth is another example of this. So the kinsman redeemer matters so much in the story as well is because he preserves the family continuity, the future of the name, the land inheritance. And for Ruth, it's really important because it is a person, the kinsman redeemer, in this case Boaz, is actually stepping in to restore what could not be restored. So again, he is somewhat of an answer to Naomi's emptiness. And you'll notice that they invoke Rachel and Leah and the house of Perez. Okay, so all of them are placing Ruth inside Israel's story of promise and providence, right? And that's what the blessing is showing, that the community joy begins in covenant restoration. Okay, let's read the final section of the chapter, the genealogy of David, verses 13 to 18. And this is going to be important because it shows us something. It shows us that the book is not just about like family happiness, but we're ending with a family tree that has significance. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom, and became his nurse. The woman of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." they named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the descendants of Perez. Perez became the father of Hezron, Hezron of Ram, Ram of Aminadab, Aminadab of Nahshon, Nahshon of Salmon, Salmon of Boaz, Boaz of Obed, Obed of Jesse, Jesse of David. All right, so this is very important. We see Perez mentioned here, and the reason why Perez is mentioned is so that Ruth's story is actually connected with the family line of Judah. And again, the story is one of restoration, okay? And it is a story of kingly preparation. We need to actually study this quite well because Jesus is also going to be the ultimate king, okay? Who's going to follow from this line. And this is, and who's going to be a descendant of David. And this is really important because when we're threading together history, there is divine providence in all of those threads of history. And God's plan unfolds in a very complex tapestry. You take a step back, it makes a lot more sense. But even when we're quite zoomed in, it may not make it that much sense. But that's the thing, right? They have a son, and God is moving the world towards David through one small act. Okay, let's see how this chapter fulfills Jesus Christ. So Ruth chapter 4 shows redemption becoming a generational and providential affair. And in Christ, we see this redemption reaching its ultimate completion because Jesus is a greater Boaz, right? He doesn't just preserve their family line, but he brings the nations into God's people and secures an inheritance that can never be lost. And the genealogy ending in David points forward to the genealogy that ends in Jesus Christ, where the story of Israel's people and Israel's hope becomes the story of the world's salvation. I'll just give you a little bit of a heads up. In Matthew chapter 1, verse 5 to 6, we see a genealogy. And that genealogy is so important because it shows exactly what we see here. So in Matthew chapter 1, verses 3 to 6, this is exactly what we read. And Judah, the father of Perez, and Zerah by Tamar, and Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Aram, and Aram the father of Aminadab, and Aminadab the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David, and David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. And if we go all the way to Matthew chapter 1 verse 16, we read, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, who bore Jesus, who is called the Messiah. All leading to Jesus. That is the most important part of the story. Okay, so how can we apply this chapter in our everyday lives? I think the most important thing to recognize is that we are going to be present, obviously, in relationships. We're going to have responsibilities, we're going to have obligations, but we need to be able to take them up faithfully. And we can make concrete steps to improving our ability to take them up faithfully by remembering that, these opportunities are given by the Lord, right? Divine providence is prevalent in all actions that we do. And this is important because we want to be able to listen to God's word, listen to God's will, but recognize that sometimes we aren't able to see it. So even in the small things, the small relationships, the small responsibilities, we can see God enacting his greater purposes, and we need to trust that he will work all things out for the greater good of his people. Alright, that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. Next time we're going to move from Ruth's redemption to the birth of Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 1. We're going to unpack Hannah's prayer, longing, and how God hears the women who cry out to him. You don't want to miss it. So that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. We learned that redemption is public, can be lawful and covenantal. Boaz acts with integrity, giving another person the first opportunity to be a redeemer, and Ruth is welcomed fully into Israel's future. And we see the birth of Obed, reversing Naomi's emptiness and restoring joy. And the genealogy shows that Ruth and Obed and Naomi are ultimately connected to Jesus Christ through David. So that's it. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate the show and follow. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.